Hello, my dear gardeners. The other day I was traveling to visit family for Easter and I came across these two very old roses. And one is a climber and another looks like a bush rose. I don't know the varieties. And the owners were asking me questions how to rejuvenate them. So today part of the video would be dedicated to rejuvenating those roses. And I had already video filmed how to rejuvenate a rose. Here it is, by the way. But today there are two differences. We have the examples and two different roses, and they are more than 35 years old. 25, I think one is the shrub rose. And the second one, I am master gardener now, to my advantage and by default to yours. So I know so much more and can share with you with so many details. And also in this video, I'm going to give you a tour of the corner of my garden, I call it woodland area, where I have Adelaide d'Orleans rose growing, and you were asking me to give you the update how that rose is doing. Also there are two boxwood plants which I planted right under the roof, where the roof drops all the water, and I was wondering how that is going to work. So today we are going to look at that too, how those plants are doing. Let's begin. Okay, here we are. We have these two roses. One is a climbing rose. Let's look at this rose. And it came with a house, the owners told me. It's more than probably 30 years old. This rose has just only one stem coming out of the soil. Looks like the rose is not really protected well for the winter, judging at the level of soil. And I don't see a lot of mulching or feeding there going on. And what this rose does, it creates all the stems all the way at the top. And sometimes that growth habit is desirable, where we want to have only one stem and then many stems on top. But in this case, the owners don't want that from this rose. They were asking me how to rejuvenate this rose and make sure that rose creates stems from the bottom. Well, there are two things going on here. The first thing you have to take into consideration that if you force the rose, invite the rose to create those stems at the bottom, you will have the growth there, and the space between the house and the walk is kind of narrow. So everything which is growing out into the walk, I would trim away, like a new stem which cannot be trimmed right on the trellis, straight there. I would just trim off. And it happened to my Katrina rose. You see how narrow I keep it against the house, and whatever shoots I cannot train into this very narrow vertical shape, I just trim off. And since rose doesn't have that shoot, it starts creating new shoots, and I keep only the shoots I want. So that would be one point. And another point, the trimming is kind of drastic. You have to give the rose several stems to rely and to collect sun rays, right, to do the photosynthesis. And here we are lucky one, because last year this rose created two shoots. One is kind of oldish and doesn't look good, but the second one is really nice and beautiful. So I advise the owners to do the cut right here. I know it's a drastic cut, and you're thinking, oh my gosh, you are going to kill the rose. But no, roses actually can produce buds on on spaces where you wouldn't even think buds can be created. Roses have a lot of sleeping buds. And hopefully when we do a cut here, rose will be left with a cane to produce leaves and to live. And then hopefully this rose would be happy creating new stems from the base. All right, and here's a mistake number one. Very often gardeners do that. They want to rejuvenate the rose, and then they don't support that rose during the first year of rejuvenation. What do I mean by support? Feeding it, watering it, giving it proper mulching. Make sure that the soil doesn't get very dry, so mulching helps a lot. And here when I look at the soil, here this area is actually very good, because you see the indentation there. It's easy to apply fertilizer there, it's easy to do mulching there, and watering too. Water is not going to run into the pathway. So what I would advise the owners, buy rose fertilizer. I like natural fertilizer. Fertilize it well, not overdo it, water it right away, give that rose maybe a bag of cow manure or good compost, and then put a layer of mulch. And that year, water that rose on a regular basis to help that rose to create beautiful stems. One more thing. Right now is early spring, so this is the best time to do the rejuvenation. Why is that? Rose has all the strengths. Rose is ready to push new growth. When we do the rejuvenation in the middle of a very hot summer, we can put rose into shock. So it's better to do it when rose didn't start growing yet. We're a little bit late here, but that's okay. And not in the middle of the winter, beautiful warm pockets. You know, we are here in New England having last several winters. We have these very warm week or two in the middle of January or February, and then cold weather comes back again. So gardeners might be like, oh my gosh, let me trim my rose and it feels so good in the garden. But then all that beautiful growth, because trimming promotes growth, all that beautiful new growth will be damaged by the frost. And when spring comes, you will have to take it all off again. All right, so the proper trimming for areas which have clear seasons would be just when rose is coming out of dormant season. How about when we don't have really clear dormant season, when where gardeners garden in warmer climates? Well, the advice is still to use that very short dormant season where a rose is kind of sitting there doing nothing, and do the rejuvenation. So, you know what? I didn't talk to you. What is a rejuvenation? When we take old stems out of the rose, and let's look at our second rose, which is the bush rose. I don't know the name of it. It looks like one of those landscape roses, and what a tenacious survivor that is. It's probably 25 years old, and look at the root competition here. All the ivy there, oh my gosh. Probably this rose, because it lives on this spot for such a long time, the root system of the rose is so deep that it's not really bothered by the competition from the roots of ivy. But generally, it's a mistake number two, where you have that competition and you are trying to rejuvenate a rose. So ideally, I would take that ivy from underneath the bush. I know it's a lot of work, but looks like this rose is living happily for many years together with ivy and doing just fine. Okay, and here we come to mistake during rejuvenation. One more mistake. Very often these gardeners have that approach that let me just take my scissors or trimmers and just give a rose a nice lollipop shape, or trim it a little bit lower, right? Well, that trimming technique might work with evergreen plants, but not really with roses, because you don't want to trim away all the healthy growth. You want to take the oldest stem. You don't look on top, what's happening on the top of the canopy. You're looking what's happening at the base of the rose. You're choosing the oldest cane and you just cut it there and take everything with it. I know rose is not going to look very balanced, but give it time. And usually rejuvenation of shrub roses or bush roses is done in 3 years if the rose is very old. So first year you take 1/3 of old canes, and then rose has all the energy to redirect into growing new canes. And those old stems are just sitting there doing nothing, collecting energy, and poor rose has to support them instead of having energy to push new growth. So that happens first year. You take 1/3 of the shrub out. Next year you do another 1/3 of old stuff, and you never look up. You look at the bottom of the rose and start there. And then make a cut and take everything out with it, all that fresh new growth on top. And the third year, you take the last one. And here you are, your rose has beautiful green stems. They're very productive. They are ready to produce blooms for you. And these roses were blooming. But you know what? They can bloom so much more. And we do want roses in our garden to create beautiful blooms for us. That's why we have roses, right? The question sometimes gardeners ask, do I even have to rejuvenate the rose if rose is living on its own? Yes, you do, if you want a beautiful plant in your garden. It helps to maintain disease, to control diseases. Flower production is so much better because younger plant is enticed to produce more blooms, right? The older plant won't have so many blooms. So these were my suggestions for the owners of the roses. And I understand that trimming of the climber can be very drastic. If you don't want to do that, what can be done on the climber? Some of the canopy can be taken off, some old stems closer to the bottom, and some are left still going. And see, maybe the climber would be enticed to produce the shoots from the bottom. You see how vulnerable that bottom portion of this rose is? If something drives into it, that can be the end of the rose. So we want those new shoots from the bottom of the rose, not somewhere 2 meters high where we can't even see the blooms. All right, so this is about 2 roses. And by the way, it's starting to rain and the wind is so strong. But I want to show you Adelaide rose and all the beautiful perennials coming up at the side of my house. Let's go. This area around my house, near the side between us and our neighbors, is quite small and narrow. And 2 years ago, I installed these stones here, so they lived through the winter very well. And right now it's quite messy because I took all the leaves out. And I know the ideal situation would be to have all the leaves on the ground, but I don't want it to be messy, so I'm doing that for the nature. I'm storing away the leaves, and then look at the soil. I'm returning the same leaves back to the soil. And by the way, here's a video how I do it. It's a very successful way. I like it, and I do it year after year. So this is my Adelaide. Look how she looks. This is its 3rd year, I believe. I kind of made a temporary support for it out of twigs, and it has very long, beautiful stems. This year would be the year of building a permanent support for her. She has big, long stems. She's a rambler, blooms only once a year, and looks very healthy and very happy here. I'm not going to give it a lot of trimming this year. Maybe I will just take away little stems, twiggy stems here at the base, because they're not going to do anything, you know. They're just sitting there doing nothing, and the airflow blocks the airflow. And by the way, I bought the tags holders right here for names. I bought them from Etsy. They come with a pen, permanent pen, and I am putting them here near my rose. Here is Branera. Look at this baby coming out, getting ready to bloom. And here are 2 boxwoods, Emerald Jewel, by the way, and they are just under the roof level where all the water comes out. And 2 years ago or 3 years ago, when I planted them, I thought to myself, how is that going to be? Are they going to live here, or they're going to be damaged by the water? And look, they are doing just fine. That water is not damaging them at all. So just in case you're wondering, should you plant under the line where the water falls from the roof, I think I would be fine with that. All right, my dear gardeners, enjoy these beautiful days of spring, although it is cold today. And it was raining for 2 days non-stop, so I'm going into the house. I worked for 2 hours in the garden. It's done. All right, so I will see you in my next video. Happy gardening.